Trevor Dickinson, and then I'm gonna take off that hat and I'm gonna.
Why it's so important today that we do this is because of the elements that stand in front of us. This was unfinished business that those today that are even in government today did not step up to the plate of the responsibility, the moral responsibility that Dr. King talked about. And I had a chance to go back to Washington, D.C. In August for the 50th anniversary on the March on Washington. And when I was listening to the speakers speak upon the stage, and each and every one of them spoke, and no one spoke about the work of Dr. King. And I kind of took up the same thing as Dr. Cornel West, that they merely forgot about Dr. King and was thinking about their own self. And so I thought it was a moral responsibility to come back here to Sacramento, the hub of our nation's economy, which is 8th in the world. And it starts right here with me and you. And it's very important because everything that takes place, California is the leader. So when it comes to all of these devastating cuts, where they continue to forget about everyday folk, everyday people such as me and you in the political process, I believe that it starts from where we march from. I believe that it starts there in the financial district and that hub where we just got through marching. And the elements of that comes here to where the lawmakers receive that information from that hub. But we are left out of the process. But today, I come to tell you that we will be a part of the process because we have something today that represents us as the people, for the people, and by the people.
Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the great leaders of the 20th century and now into the 21st century. My name's Mark Marin. I'm a local civil rights lawyer, and since I became a lawyer in 1968, I've seen and been a part of many movements, some of which have achieved results and many of which have not. And I've learned a few lessons from that involvement which I'd like to share with you. The women's liberation movement, when women demanded to be paid equally for equal work, changed our very language so that we no longer speak of postmen, of workers, of workmen's compensation, of firemen, policemen, but we've replaced those terms with gender neutral, inclusive terms, and we've changed our culture. Of course, even though we have laws which outlaw discrimination against people because of their sex or sexual orientation, we know women still have not gained full equality, either economically or socially. The movement to end the Vietnam War grew out of isolated demonstrations on college campuses to a mass movement which closed Washington, D.C. with massive marches and extended to marches and demonstrations in cities throughout the country, and ended not only the war, but the decision of President Johnson to seek a second term. We ended that war, but of course we've had the Persian Gulf War, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and many others which we don't even call war, but police actions or peacekeeping ventures or stabilization efforts. But the killing goes on in search of political and financial domination. The civil rights movement grew from heroic individual action, but refusal to get on the back of the bus, to get up from the lunch counter, to drink from the drinking fountains labeled colored only, into mass movements which boycotted business districts, rioted in central cities, which ghettoized minorities, and which demanded equality and access to housing, education, and jobs. The farm workers movement started with the organization of a union to improve working conditions and pay for farm workers, and wasn't successful until a mass movement of support was organized for the boycott of grapes harvested by workers denied a living wage. What these struggles have in common, and which they shared with the movements which achieved gains throughout our history, is the elevation from isolated small actions and demonstrations into a mass movement which activated and mobilized large groups of people who understood the justice of the demands and wouldn't let up their efforts until change was secured. We are now at a time in our history when, despite apparent legal gains outlawing discrimination, we have more minorities in prison than we have in college. We have greater shocking disparities in wealth between those few at the top and those many struggling with crippling poverty. And we have public education which fails our students, and allegedly public colleges which charge more for tuition than many families make in a full year. We have unemployment so deep that people have stopped even looking for jobs that don't exist. We have police killing people on the streets and getting away with it. We have no public housing program, no way to feed and shelter homeless people, and a pitiful Affordable Care Act which protects the private insurance industry from giving up the huge profits they rake off of the top of premium dollars that we all have to pay if we want health insurance. Don't look to the courts to solve these problems. There's no justice from a Supreme Court which sanctions corporations as persons being able to give uncontrolled huge funds to buy their selected candidates public offices, from positions on the city council of our cities to the state and federal representatives and legislatures and congresses. No, we cannot and we never have been able to ask for justice, to ask for fairness and equality, for recognition that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that means a right to a job, a right to education, to health care, and to housing. Society should function for the benefit of the many, not the few. Government should serve the people, not the rich only. But we will not achieve those ends. We will not get the country we dream of, which Dr. Martin Luther King dreamt of and saw when he went to the top of the mountain, unless we take the lessons of the past movements and replicate them. Organize. Educate. Mobilize. Power concedes nothing without a demand, and no demand succeeds without the masses voicing it and working for it. Onward to victory. A better world is possible. With your efforts and the creation of a mass movement, we will succeed. We occupied Zuccotti Park. We occupied parks throughout the country, and the Occupy movement grew, united in a common struggle against a system which oppressed the 99% and which suppressed the 99% and which was supported by a government which was truly threatened by the rising of the masses. But we have not been defeated. We are only regrouping, and we will, with your efforts and dedication, rise again, stronger and more resolute. And we will win, and we will occupy not only parks and public spaces, but the government itself. Then we will truly have a government for the people and by the people.